Right now in Boynton Beach, a family is brewing coffee with water that passed through their neighbor's septic tank 72 hours ago. In Cape Coral, a retired couple is watering their lawn with liquid that contains trace amounts of pharmaceuticals flushed 3 houses down. In the Florida Keys, children are drinking from wells contaminated with bacteria from failing septic systems installed in 1976. This isn't a horror movie. This is Florida hydrology. 1.7 million septic tanks are leaching human waste, nitrogen, phosphorus, and chemicals directly into the Floridan Aquifer, the same aquifer that provides drinking water to over 10 million people. There's no treatment plant, no filtration barrier, just porous limestone, gravity, and 3 feet of soil between your toilet and your neighbor's tap water. And here's what nobody told you when you bought that house. Your property is sitting on top of a sewage time bomb that's poisoning the water supply and destroying your equity at the same time. In our last video, over 14,000 of you watched us expose Florida's saltwater intrusion crisis. Thousands of you asked the same question in the comments. Why is this happening so fast? Why are wells that provided fresh water for decades suddenly pulling up salt? Here's the answer nobody wants to admit. Septic contamination is accelerating the aquifer collapse. Nitrogen loading from 1.7 million toilets is chemically degrading the freshwater buffer that keeps saltwater at bay. This isn't just about climate change or overdevelopment. This is about flushing your toilet and poisoning the water supply for an entire state. And if you own property on Septic in Florida, your home just became financially toxic. State officials know. Environmental engineers have been screaming about this for years. But counties keep approving permits. Developers keep installing septic to save costs. And homeowners keep buying with zero idea that their dream home sits on top of a sewage time bomb. This is housing intel, and we're about to expose the septic crisis that's turbocharging Florida's real estate collapse. Hit subscribe right now, because what you're about to learn will permanently change how you see every property in this state. Let's start with scale, because the numbers are staggering and most people have no idea. Florida has approximately 2.7 million septic systems statewide. That includes residential, commercial, and industrial. Of those, roughly 1.7 million are residential septic tanks serving single-family homes, mobile homes, and small properties. That is 12% of all septic systems in the entire United States concentrated in one state. 12%. And the vast majority were installed decades ago, long before anyone understood or cared about long-term environmental consequences. Here's how a septic system is supposed to work. Wastewater from your home flows into an underground tank. Solids settle. Bacteria partially decompose waste. The liquid effluent then drains into a leach field, where it's supposed to percolate slowly through soil, getting naturally filtered before eventually reaching groundwater. That's the theory. That's what engineers designed on paper in the 1950s and 60s. But Florida's geology makes that theory completely impossible. Florida sits on porous karst limestone, the same rock that forms the Floridan Aquifer. When septic effluent enters Florida soil, it doesn't filter. It doesn't get trapped by clay or dense sediment. It seeps directly through cracks, fissures, and voids in the limestone and enters the aquifer within hours or days. There is no natural barrier. Nitrogen from human waste, phosphorus from detergents and soaps, bacteria, viruses, pharmaceuticals you flushed, cleaning chemicals, everything goes straight into the groundwater. And because Florida's water table is so shallow in most areas, often just 3 to 10 feet below the surface, especially in coastal and low-lying zones, the distance between your septic drain field and drinking water supply is negligible. You are drinking from the same geological layer your waste drains into. That's not hyperbole, that's hydrology. Now let's connect this to the saltwater intrusion crisis we exposed in Part 1. Septic contamination and saltwater intrusion are not separate problems. They are interconnected, and they amplify each other in a deadly feedback loop that's accelerating faster than most models predicted. Here's the mechanism. When septic systems pump nitrogen and phosphorus into the aquifer, they degrade water quality and create chemical conditions that weaken the aquifer's ability to resist saltwater intrusion. High nitrogen levels fuel algae blooms in springs, rivers, and coastal estuaries. When algae die and decompose, they consume oxygen, creating hypoxic dead zones. This disrupts natural hydrology and reduces the pressure gradient that normally keeps salt water from moving inland. At the same time, 10 million people are extracting fresh water from the aquifer faster than rainfall can recharge it. When freshwater levels drop below sea level, which they have across much of coastal South Florida, salt water rushes in to fill the void. Septic contamination accelerates this by degrading the remaining freshwater quality, forcing municipalities to drill deeper wells, switch to more expensive alternatives like desalination, or in some cases, just accept declining water quality and hope residents don't notice until it's too late. According to Florida Department of Environmental Protection assessments, nitrogen loading from septic systems is one of the top 3 sources of groundwater contamination statewide. But state regulators have been slow to act, or more accurately, deliberately inactive, because the only real solution is connecting homes to centralized sewer systems, and that costs between $10,000 and $30,000 per property. Multiply that by 1.7 million septic homes, and you're looking at a $20 to $50 billion infrastructure crisis that no politician wants to fund and no county wants to mandate because the backlash would be nuclear. Let's zoom into the areas where this is hitting hardest right now, because it's not uniform. Septic contamination follows predictable patterns based on geology, density, and water table depth. The worst areas fall into 3 categories. First, rural counties with explosive growth rates. Polk County, Lake County, Marion County, Hernando County, Citrus County. These regions saw massive residential development from 2000 through 2020. Developers bought cheap rural land, built subdivisions, installed septic systems to avoid the cost of extending sewer lines, and sold homes to buyers who had zero idea they were purchasing properties sitting on environmental time bombs. These counties now have tens of thousands of aging septic systems in close proximity, all draining into the same shallow aquifer. Second, older coastal neighborhoods built between the 1950s and 1980s. Parts of the Florida Keys, Southwest Florida, and older sections of the Treasure Coast were developed long before environmental regulations tightened. Many of these septic systems are 40, 50, even 60 years old. They're failing. Drain fields are saturated. Tanks are cracked. Raw sewage is leaking directly into soil and surface water. And because these are older neighborhoods with lower property values, nobody has the money or political will to fund conversions. Third, areas with high water tables and chronic flooding. When the water table rises during summer rainy season or after hurricanes, septic drain fields become waterlogged. Effluent has nowhere to percolate. It either pools on the surface, flows into stormwater drains, or shoots directly into the aquifer without any soil contact at all. This is especially catastrophic in low-lying areas of South Florida, where the water table sits just 2 to 3 feet below ground. In these zones, septic systems are essentially direct injection systems for raw sewage into the drinking water supply. Here's the visual nobody wants you to see. Picture a map of Florida. Now overlay 3 data layers. First, red dots representing every septic system in the state. 1.7 million of them. Second, blue shaded zones showing aquifer recharge areas where rainfall infiltrates and replenishes groundwater. Third, yellow zones marking areas with documented saltwater intrusion. Now, watch what happens when you layer them together. The red septic dots sit directly on top of blue recharge zones. The highest density septic clusters align almost perfectly with the most critical aquifer recharge areas. And the yellow saltwater intrusion zones are expanding fastest, exactly where septic density is highest. Coastal Broward, Palm Beach, Collier, Lee. This isn't correlation. This is causation. Septic nitrogen is chemically degrading the fresh water that's supposed to keep salt water out. And every single county environmental office has access to this map. They've had it for decades. They know. Engineers know. Hydrologists know. State officials know. And they let it happen anyway, because stopping it would have required saying no to developers, limiting growth, and spending billions on infrastructure that doesn't generate immediate tax revenue or campaign donations. So they approved the permits, signed off on the subdivisions, and walked away. Now homeowners are left holding properties that are financial toxic waste. Let's talk about health and environmental impacts, because this isn't abstract. This is affecting real people right now. High nitrate levels in drinking water are directly linked to methemoglobinemia, also known as blue baby syndrome, in infants under 6 months. It reduces the blood's ability to carry oxygen and can be fatal. Nitrate contamination is also associated with increased cancer risk, thyroid dysfunction, and reproductive problems in adults. Phosphorus from septic systems fuels toxic algae blooms that shut down beaches, kill marine life, and release airborne toxins that cause respiratory problems. Bacterial contamination from failing septic systems has been documented in private wells across Florida, forcing families to switch to bottled water or install expensive whole-house filtration systems that cost thousands of dollars. In the Florida Keys, septic contamination became so severe that it was killing coral reefs offshore. The state finally mandated a multi-billion-dollar sewer conversion project. But that project, which began over a decade ago, is still incomplete. And it has driven property taxes and utility fees so high that longtime residents, people who lived there for 30 or 40 years, have been forced to sell and leave because they can't afford the assessments. Meanwhile, Florida's iconic natural springs, Silver Springs, Wakula Springs, Rainbow Springs, have all experienced dramatic declines in water quality directly linked to septic and agricultural nitrogen runoff. 20 years ago, these springs ran crystal clear. Today, they're choked with algae. The water is murky. Fish populations have collapsed. These aren't just tourist attractions. They're discharge points for the aquifer. When a spring turns green and toxic, it's a visible symptom that the aquifer itself is contaminated. And if the aquifer is contaminated, so is the tap water for millions of Floridians who depend on it. Now, let's connect this directly to real estate values and financial risk, because this is where the septic crisis becomes a housing crisis. If you own a home on septic in Florida, you are facing a perfect storm of compounding costs and collapsing value. First, septic systems age out. A typical system lasts 20 to 30 years, depending on soil conditions and maintenance. Replacement costs $8,000 to $15,000, depending on site conditions, soil percolation rates, and local regulations. If your system fails, you're on the hook. Homeowner's insurance doesn't cover it. You either pay out of pocket, or you can't legally occupy your home until it's fixed. Second, more counties are issuing sewer conversion mandates in areas where contamination is documented or where state and federal regulators are threatening enforcement action. When that happens, property owners get hit with special assessments ranging from $10,000 to $30,000 to cover the cost of extending sewer lines and connecting homes. That bill comes on top of your mortgage, property taxes, homeowners insurance, flood insurance, and HOA fees if applicable. For retirees on fixed incomes or families already stretched by inflation, it's financially devastating. Many are forced to sell at a loss just to escape the liability. Third, buyers are getting smarter and more cautious. They're asking about septic during showings. They're requesting water quality tests as a condition of sale. They're checking county records for planned sewer mandates. And when they discover a property is on septic in a high contamination zone or a county with looming conversion requirements, they either walk away entirely or demand steep price reductions to cover future costs. According to real estate agents operating in rural Florida counties, homes on septic are now selling for 10 to 20% less than comparable homes with sewer connections. And that gap is widening. In areas where sewer mandates have been formally announced, property values have dropped 30 to 40% virtually overnight because buyers know they're inheriting a massive financial liability with no way out except paying the assessment or walking away. Here's what real estate agents won't tell you, and this is where it gets legally ugly. In Florida, sellers are required to disclose known material defects that affect property value. But septic system contamination is not classified as a defect unless the system itself is visibly failing or has been officially cited by the health department. Your septic drain field can be leaching nitrogen, bacteria, and pharmaceuticals directly into the aquifer. Your well water can have elevated nitrate levels. Your neighbor's wells can be contaminated because of your system. And legally, the seller does not have to disclose any of that unless they have specific written notice of a health department violation. The system is designed to protect sellers and agents, not buyers. Buyer beware isn't just a saying in Florida real estate. It's the business model. This is setting up the next wave of real estate fraud and misrepresentation lawsuits. And it's coming hard in 2027 through 2030. Buyers who purchased homes on septic without disclosure of contamination risk or pending sewer mandates are going to sue sellers, agents, and inspection companies. Class actions will target counties for knowingly approving septic permits in unsuitable areas. This will make the construction defect litigation of the 2000s look small. Market. Let's dig into the political and economic reasons this has been allowed to fester for decades. The answer is money and power. The development and construction industry in Florida is enormously politically influential. Developers donate heavily to campaigns at the state, county, and municipal levels. In return, they get favorable zoning, streamlined permitting, and regulatory exemptions that let them build in areas that should have been off-limits. Septic systems cost developers $8,000 to $12,000 per home. Extending a sewer line and connecting to a treatment plant costs $50,000 to $100,000 per home, depending on distance, topography, and existing infrastructure capacity. So developers lobby aggressively for septic approvals. They build subdivisions on cheap land. They install the minimum required infrastructure. They sell the homes, and they walk away. The long-term environmental and financial consequences get dumped onto homeowners, local governments, and ultimately taxpayers when the cleanup bill comes due. State officials have been reluctant to mandate large-scale septic to sewer conversions because the political blowback would be catastrophic. Imagine going to 1.7 million Florida homeowners and telling them they each owe $20,000 for a sewer hookup they didn't ask for and can't afford. It's political suicide. So instead, the crisis gets managed through denial, piecemeal regulation, and cost shifting. Contamination gets blamed on agriculture or stormwater runoff. Sewer mandates get delayed until federal regulators threaten enforcement. And by the time action is forced, property values have already collapsed and owners are financially trapped. Here's what makes this even more infuriating. The technology and knowledge to fix this exist. Other states and countries have successfully transitioned from septic dependence to centralized wastewater treatment. It's expensive, yes, but it's entirely doable with proper funding and political will. Florida could have created a statewide septic-to-sewer conversion fund financed through a combination of state bonds, federal infrastructure grants, and long-term user fees spread over 20 or 30 years to make it affordable. The Biden administration's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act allocated billions for water and wastewater infrastructure. Florida could have aggressively pursued that funding, but Governor DeSantis rejected hundreds of millions in federal climate and water quality grants, arguing they came with regulatory strings attached. So the money went to other states, and Florida's septic crisis continues accelerating. Now in 2026, the bill is coming due in the form of collapsing property values, contaminated wells, uninsurable homes, and aquifer degradation that will take decades and tens of billions of dollars to reverse, if it even can be reversed at this point. Let's talk about what this means for you right now if you're a homeowner, buyer, or investor. Here's your action checklist. First, determine if your property is on septic. Check your property deed, your closing documents, or call your county environmental health department. Don't assume, verify. Second, if you're on septic, get your water tested immediately. Not just a basic bacteria test. Get a full panel that includes nitrates, phosphorus, chlorides, bacteria, and volatile organic compounds. Cost is $150 to $300 depending on the lab. If contamination is detected, install a whole house filtration system or switch to bottled water for drinking and cooking. Don't wait. Third, check your county's wastewater master plan or comprehensive plan for planned sewer expansions. This is public record. Search your county name plus wastewater master plan. If your area is listed for conversion in the next 5 to 10 years, start budgeting now. $20,000 minimum. Don't wait for the special assessment notice to arrive. By then, it's too late to plan. Fourth, if you're buying property in Florida, avoid septic homes in high-risk areas entirely, unless you're getting a massive discount that accounts for future conversion costs and contamination risk. Focus on properties already connected to centralized sewer in counties with stable water quality and no looming mandates. Pay close attention to rural counties with high growth, coastal areas with shallow water tables, and neighborhoods near documented contamination zones. Fifth, if you're an investor, understand that septic properties are rapidly becoming toxic assets in Florida. Carrying costs are rising. The buyer pool is shrinking. Regulatory risk is enormous. Unless you're acquiring at a 50% discount, with a clear exit strategy and timeline, stay away. Now, let's zoom out to the bigger picture, because Florida's septic crisis is a warning for the entire country. Other states with high septic dependence, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, parts of the rural West and South, face similar risks. But Florida is the canary in the coal mine because its unique combination of porous geology, shallow water table, explosive population growth, and political resistance to regulation is making the consequences arrive faster and more visibly than anywhere else. The same dynamics driving Florida's septic disaster are driving broader problems nationwide. Developers prioritize short-term profit over long-term sustainability. Local governments approve projects to boost tax revenue without considering infrastructure capacity or environmental limits. Buyers make the largest financial decisions of their lives without understanding hidden risks literally buried beneath their feet. And when systems fail, costs get socialized, while profits remain private. Florida's septic crisis is a microcosm of this pattern. It's a case study in what happens when growth is prioritized over geology, when campaign donations matter more than aquifer health, and when the bill for decades of bad decisions finally comes due. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody in Florida's real estate or development industry wants to admit. Large portions of the state should never have been developed the way they were. Building dense residential subdivisions on septic systems in areas with shallow water tables, porous limestone geology, and high flood risk was a disaster by design. It happened because it was profitable in the short term and because regulators either didn't understand the consequences or didn't care. Now, the consequences are here. Property values in septic-dependent areas are entering a long-term structural decline. As contamination worsens, as sewer mandates roll out, as buyers become informed and cautious, these properties will continue losing value. Insurance companies, already fleeing Florida because of hurricane exposure, are starting to price in water quality and infrastructure risk. If your home is on septic in a known contamination zone, expect premiums to climb even higher if you can get coverage at all. Mortgage lenders are also tightening standards. Some are beginning to require water quality testing and septic inspections as conditions for loan approval. If contamination is found or the system is failing, loans get denied or held until remediation is completed. This is just the beginning. Over the next 5 to 10 years, Florida's septic crisis will reshape the real estate market in ways most people aren't prepared for. And the people who will suffer most are the ones who bought believing Florida was the American dream, only to discover they purchased a sewage nightmare they can't escape. So here's the bottom line. If you own property on septic in Florida, you're sitting on a financial time bomb that's ticking faster every year. If you're thinking about buying, you're about to inherit someone else's environmental and financial disaster unless you do your homework and demand massive price concessions. If you're an investor, septic properties are toxic unless you're getting them at deep distressed pricing with a clear plan to offload before mandates hit. And if you're just watching Florida's real estate market from the outside, understand that the septic crisis is one of the hidden accelerants of the broader collapse. Exploding insurance, crashing condo prices, saltwater intrusion, overbuilding in flood zones, and 1.7 million septic tanks pumping contamination into the aquifer every single day. These aren't separate problems. They're all connected. They're all accelerating, and they're all converging into a perfect storm that will make large parts of Florida financially unlivable over the next decade. The Floridan Aquifer is being poisoned from above and invaded from below. The real estate market built on top of it is collapsing under the weight of infrastructure failure and systemic neglect. And the people who should have protected you, developers, regulators, realtors, politicians, either didn't care or actively made it worse for profit. But now, you know. And knowledge is power. Use it to protect yourself, your family, and your financial future. If this investigation opened your eyes to the hidden septic catastrophe destroying Florida real estate, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to Housing Intel for weekly data-driven intelligence that exposes the crises mainstream media refuses to cover. Ring that bell so you never miss an upload, because we're far from done with Florida. Drop a comment below. Are you on septic? Have you seen water quality decline? Has your county announced sewer mandates or special assessments? Your real-world experiences confirm the data and help us keep exposing the truth. Next video, we're covering the insurance death spiral and why Florida homeowners are being crushed by premiums nobody can afford. See you there. Because sometimes, knowing what's poisoning the ground beneath your home is the most valuable real estate intelligence of all.